let's talk about how I use my Fujifilm Xh2s, the camera I am filming on right now, on productions. And let's see how it stacks up with the Kinefinity Mavo S35 on set and how I use both cameras in tandem. Here goes my cat. And before we dive into this, I would really appreciate if you like, subscribe, and just comment your thoughts about this camera or anything in general or whatever you want, really. Yeah, let's go. When I purchased the Fujifilm Xh2s back in 2022, so it's almost 2 years now, owning this camera and using it, it was primarily going to be my, do-it-all content creation camera. And it has been. Literally about 80% of all the videos you see on this channel. Oh, by the way, there is a massive Fujifilm playlist on this channel that you should watch, so you can see other content I've made with this camera and about this camera, but I digress. But over the last year and a half, my uses for this camera has evolved drastically, and it's for the better. So outside of YouTube, I am a full-time director DP with my beloved friends Niles, Caleb, and Taylor. We are studying 16. So the Xh2s has been my B camera of choice on a lot of the projects that we shoot. Now, granted, there have been bigger budget projects where we're, renting Sonys or sometimes Aris or whatever that is. We're between, 50, 60, 80K budgets that still have a social element. So when a project is being formed, as it goes through the pre-production pipeline, for example, is this project for social media, or is this a full-on production with 20-person crew, or is it a doc? So it eventually falls down to me and Niles to think through the shot list, the boards, even an animatic, to narrow down the tools that we need. And so this process helps me determine what gear is going to be suitable for the job. And I also look at the budget. And so 8 times out of 10, that's a weird ratio, but 8 times out of 10, depending on the type of client that we're working with or the end product, do we want to make our own director's cut? I tend to rent more good glass than I do a camera. So typically that means I'm using my Mavo S35 as the A camera. It is a professional, robust camera system, and I've been very happy with using it. It's been on like 13 different jobs over the last year that I've had it. It's a workhorse. Obviously, there's some quirks, but I mean, there's no camera on the market that doesn't have a quirk, even the Burano, like, come on. So that means I'm using the Xh2s as the B cam, as the crash cam, as something that's going to be supplemental, but it can also stand on its own as an A cam, which we've used for a sports commercial campaign that we shot with Caleb Williams last year. But personally, I think it shines in sort of the B cam kind of area, and I'll explain a little bit why throughout this video. You want to say hi to the people? All right, real quick, let me talk about today's sponsor and partner of the channel, MPB. We all feel that pressure when a new lens or a new camera comes to the market, and we immediately think, oh, we need to have that, or we feel pressure to have that. But I'm here to tell you to think used first. And yes, new things have a time and place, but if you don't have the money, you don't want to put yourself in the hole. Now, in the beginning, MPB was focused heavily on photography, but in the last few years, they've really amped up the filmmaking side of the gear that they offer to sell. And you should really check it out. There's some really nice things in there. There's some things I didn't even realize when I was looking back on the site, because I do need a new tripod. I was thinking about some new accessories to add to my kit, and it was a lot of options to look at. They do an excellent job of clearly listing the condition of the item with fair pricing. Now, I did make a video about a lens I've recently purchased from them. You can check it out here. But if you want to know more information about MPB, there's a link in the description below. Again, thanks MPB for sponsoring this video. All right, let's get back to it. Now, I don't talk about color grading at all on this channel. I've talked about it maybe once or twice, but it's not my expertise. I try to find a system that I'm really good at so I can get my image to a point. And I'm pretty basic. I'm not trying to throw in certain color or, this and that and the other. If the image is good at a camera and it's healthy exposure, then I can get it in a nice space with contrast, saturation, all that stuff, I'll be happy with it. Now, when it comes to matching the Xh2s to my Mavo, which is the camera that is most used with it, first of all, get a good exposure whatever you're doing. And I'm gonna have these two images up here anyway, so you can kind of see what I'm working through. But get the correct, white balance for both cameras, so you can just match it easier, get the roughly the right image. I'm living around ISO 1200, 1250, which is the native ISO for f-log2. And then in my Mavo, I live around 1280, which is in the Mavo, you can kind of shift your dynamic range towards the shadows or towards the highlights. So when I'm above 800, so around 1280, I have a stop meter, which is like 7.3 stops. I'm adding more stops into, or shifting more stops into my highlights, which is kind of nice because I like the way it rolls off that way. And I can clean up shadows. It's really easy to clean up shadows in post with the noise reduction and still retain a lot of detail and information that way. So that's how I kind of handle it from the exposure camera setting aspect. Then when I'm moving into the DaVinci Resolve, I convert everything to Log C, which is a simple conversion. Sue me if you want, or if that's not the proper way. It works for me. I have a color calibrated monitor, 10-bit, and I mainly focus on my scopes. I make sure, I treat both cameras as if I'm going to be using an RE8 LUT, and so I convert both profiles to that. So I do that, transform it, and then I put the Rec 709 LUT from RE on there, and then I get tweaking. I get, kind of massaging that image. I don't have to do much with my Mavo. I really like how it comes out, especially if I'm, the way I expose it, how I have the light and everything like that. If it looks good, 9 times out of 10, I'm not doing much. The Fujifilm, I'm adding a few other things. Like I said, I'm trying to soften the image a little bit more to match it. You kind of see here, now granted it's YouTube compression, but you can kind of see some differences. And what I've noticed with the Xh2s is that the tonal separation of color is a little bit more muddier, especially in the highlights with the Fujifilm. The Mavo has a bit more separation, a bit more, you can kind of see where the tones kind of roll off into each other. It doesn't just kind of bleed. It kind of rolls off on each other there. So that's one thing I've noticed. So if you're stacking this side by side, and this is just from an amateur color, I'm not even calling myself a colorist, an amateur editor. That's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at these two images. I think moving forward, I might be just underexposing it just a tad bit more on the Fujifilm because it has it has a great range when you're pulling up the shadows. Just because I noticed in the highlights, it just gets a little bit just too blendy, too muddy for me. I'm looking at my notes. I mentioned this in all my videos when I talk about settings on my Xh2s, is that turn down sharpness to -4 and I turn down noise reduction to -4. It's still too sharp in my opinion, but I wish there was a little bit more control, like to completely just turn off sharpening and turn off noise reduction, but I'm asking for too much, ain't I? I supplement that with filters. My favorite filtration right now is black satin and glimmer glass, or lenses, very unique style lenses or characterized lenses. I really like using the ingenues when I'm on set. It gives me the most versatility. It's a fast zoom, and it's a really, really great image. Noticing that's where I kind of had to dirty up the image even more sometimes in post to make it look close to the Mavo. So, wow, I said a lot. I don't know if I breathed at all. Now, autofocus. This has been a very hot topic amongst the Fujifilm community. I understand that a lot of people who get a camera system want to have reliable autofocus, and unfortunately Fujifilm, whatever happened, there was a bug that really just kind of took a step back with the autofocus. It was really solid when it first launched and throughout the first 3 or so firmware updates, but of recent it's been kind of took a step back. There's going to be some tweaks, and it hasn't been great. I've made a comment on that before. It hasn't been great because I mainly only use autofocus when I'm doing YouTube. And that's where it stops for me. But I get it. If you're a solo operator, you're using this camera for that and this and the other. Yeah, I hope that it just gets back to where it was and improves from there, because they did add a ton of features from these last few updates. Still not everything I want to see in this camera. I have the GFX 102 right now, and it's still loaded with other features that this camera doesn't have. Hopefully that's coming. I know nothing just yet. Regarding to the gear and what lenses I use for autofocus, right now I am in love with the 13mm Viltrox for Fujifilm. It is the perfect, this is what you're looking at right now. This is that lens. It's wide, so it's around a 20mm equivalent, which is one of my favorite focal lengths. And it's fast, it's f1.4. So this is what I use. It works really, really well with the Fujifilm cameras and the autofocus. And so hopefully it's been doing okay. I can't see, I have this little screen. But yeah, I really enjoy using it. In a professional setting, I have a PL mount to X mount on here. A lot of you are asking, what mount do I get? You can get metal bones, PL to X mount. You get wooden camera, PL to X mount, Misc. There's a lot out there. It's just a dummy pass-through PL mount, no electronics because it's all manual. Because we either have a first AC or I'm using the Lidar on this, or I'm pulling my own focus. So I don't have a big qualm with what's going on with the autofocus, but I understand it's affecting a lot of people out there. So again, hopefully Fujifilm does watch these videos and it'll, they're working on it. There's only so much I can say, and it's only up to the company to actually do those things. So there'll be patches, going to fixes throughout. So just be patient. It happens. Something else I forgot to mention in terms of transmission systems. Right now, I rock 2 different types of transmission systems. The DJI SDR. I made a video review about this. This is very handy for just general purpose. You can have, Wi-Fi connectivity to different devices. You kind of multiply it and so on and so forth. It's really nice, really compact. So this is one option I'll just use for general use. If I need more critical, closer to zero latency, which this is advertised as zero latency, this is the Teradek ACE 750. I've had this for a little bit, and this is the system I would prefer over this, just because I can use this in conjunction with the Bolt 6. Obviously, this is going to come in like $530 for a transmission and receiver. This is going to be around $1,200, but you can actually expand this again to the Bolt system versus it just being just this. Now, I say all this because I do have the DJI transmission system, I guess the Pro version, but this does not work with any of the Fujifilm cameras right now. Still, it still bugs out. So these are 2 options, but the ACE is actually just probably a lot better. 750 is just the range, so 750 feet. But in terms of zero latency, clean feed, and all that stuff, I would choose this. Now, with timecode in this camera, a lot of times I just leave it up to my sound guy. So I say here, it has a 3.5 jack. Either you jam sync it with technical sync or whatever device you have with you, or just, do it manually. And that's how it happens most of the time. They're just putting it in manually. And we did a lot of that because we had a 2-up kind of interview thing recently. This was the B camera, the Xh2s was, A camera was the Mavo. And it worked just fine after that. But for the cage system that I use for this camera is the wooden camera Xh2s cage system. I recommend it anytime. I know it's expensive, but I highly recommend getting this case system. The fit and finish, the mounting points, the sturdiness. It is everything you want to have a robust system that can take a beating while on set. Whether you're doing top rigs, this is going to give you the best flexibility, and you're going to get quality from a system like the wooden camera system for the Xh2s. Would I recommend anything else? I don't know. I understand, like I said, it is expensive. This is not a cheap system to buy, but this system is going to last you. My friend Edward, he made a video and he was showing us something on one of his small rig cages for the Xh2s, and he bent it while on camera. Like, that's crazy. He called me and was like, bro, this actually happened to me. I'm like, dang, I can't do that, man. I don't want nothing to bend or break because I use this camera so often, so heavily on set. It needs to have some security and some reassurance that this thing can kind of handle, what it can handle on set. So I recommend this. This is the only case system I recommend for this camera. Okay, monitoring. This has been a love-hate relationship with me for this camera. Just because, you're limited to HDMI. Also, I did make a video about this sort of issue, and it still hasn't been addressed, and it's been almost a year. Now, I understand you're limited to the HDMI port. That plagues all mirrorless cameras. You're limited to whoever the I/O is on there. You're not going to get professional I/Os. But in this case, I use Smallhd monitors. And one thing I've noticed with this camera still is this black line that happens when you're displaying. I believe it only happens in the 4K mode, and you're outputting a clean signal, and this line just comes up. I don't know why that happens, and still hoping it gets addressed because it's very distracting. But on the flip side, the positive thing is using Smallhd monitors is that I use EL zone, and this is how I judge now exposure on the camera. EL zone is a mapping of your exposure through stops or based on stops. So it's on 18% gray, and then you go from 1 stop, 2 stop, 3 stops, 4 stops to 6 on the bright side, and then -6 on the dark side. Only with the Smallhd monitors this is available for these cameras because they have the same pipeline. They communicate through the pipeline to get the log information there, and you can kind of judge it off of that. You can use it for other cameras too, like Arri, Sony, Red, so on and so forth. And it's a fantastic way to judge your exposure. So that's my favorite thing about using the Smallhd monitors, outside of it being a really quality good quality monitor with this camera is that I had that feature, and it's a really good feature that I use often. Oh, golly, I said a lot. Yeah, that is literally how I use this camera. It's not complicated. It does the job really well. This camera has not failed me. Again, I understand everything can happen. There's been breaking from this camera. There's been, not the most exciting things, but people got to bash, and sometimes negativity just catches a wave and people want to jump on it. I'm so glad I bought this camera 2 years ago. The return on investment on this thing came in tenfolds because I'm going to be using this thing till it wears out, basically. Anyway, what say you? Let me know in the comments below if there's any other questions, anything that I missed. I would love to know what your thoughts are. Oh, wow. Before I even wrap this up, I totally forgot to mention, I'm going to be working with Fujifilm a little bit more closely, which is kind of cool. That's why I have the GFX 102. This is something I've been wanting for a while. They've recognized the things that I've done. So hard work does pay off. You'll be seeing me on their IG sometime here and there, but also we're working on a project that I can't say just yet what's it about. Oof, there's a lot happening. Anyway, I gotta get to it, but I don't want to share that. It's very exciting for me, and hopefully this will, I do what I can to return some sort of information and experience that will help you all. And that's the whole point of my channel, is just to kind of give you the experience that I see, but also, the things that I can test or use that can be hopefully useful to you in that information. So now I feel like I'm just rambling, but yeah, I catch you guys on the next video. See ya.